Hello, thank you for joining us again today. We're here at the Caribou Public Library for our chapter book story time. I'm Miss Erin, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us. So we're going to read the first half of chapter 14 today. We're continuing to read in Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and this one is titled Secrets. Joe was very busy up in the garret, for the October days began to grow chilly and the afternoons were short. For 2 or 3 hours, the sun lay warmly in at the high window, showing Joe seated on the old sofa writing busily, with her papers spread out upon a trunk before her, while Scrabble, the pet rat, promenaded the beams overhead, accompanied by his oldest son, a fine young fellow who was evidently very proud of his whiskers. Quite absorbed in her work, Joe scribbled away until the last page was filled, when she signed her name with a flourish and threw down her pen, exclaiming, "There, I've done my best. If this doesn't suit, I shall have to wait until I can do better." Lying back on the sofa, she read the manuscript carefully through, making dashes here and there and putting in many exclamation points, which looked like little balloons. Then she tied it up with a smart red ribbon and sat a minute looking at it with a sober, wistful expression, which plainly showed how earnest her work had been. Joe's desk up here was an old tin kitchen, which hung against the wall. In it, she kept her papers and a few books, safely shut away from Scrabble, who, being likewise of a literary turn, was fond of making a circulating library of such books as were left in his way, by eating the leaves. From this tin receptacle, Joe produced another manuscript, and, putting both in her pocket, crept quietly downstairs, leaving her friends to nibble her pens and taste her ink. She put on her hat and jacket as noiselessly as possible, and going to the back entry window, got out upon the roof of a low porch, swung herself down to the grassy bank, and took a roundabout way to the road. Once there, she composed herself, hailed a passing omnibus, and rolled away to town, looking very merry and mysterious. If anyone had been watching her, he would have thought her movements decidedly peculiar, for, along alighting, she went off at a great pace until she reached a certain number in a certain busy street. Having found the place with some difficulty, she went into the doorway, looked up the dirty stairs, and, after standing stock still a minute, suddenly dived into the street and walked away as rapidly as she came. This maneuver she repeated several times, to the great amusement of a black-eyed young gentleman lounging in the window of a building opposite. On returning for the third time, Joe gave herself a shake, pulled her hat over her eyes, and walked up the stairs, looking as if she was going to have all her teeth out. There was a dentist's sign, among others, which adorned the entrance, and after staring a moment at the pair of artificial jaws which slowly opened and shut to draw attention to a fine set of teeth, the young gentleman put on his coat, took his hat, and went down to post himself in the opposite doorway, saying with a smile and a shiver, "It's like her to come alone, but if she has a bad time, she'll need someone to help her home." In 10 minutes, Joe came running downstairs with a very red face and a general appearance of a person who had just passed through a trying ordeal of some sort. When she saw the young gentleman, she looked anything but pleased, and passed him with a nod, but he followed, asking with an air of sympathy, "Did you have a bad time?" "Not very." "You got through quick." "Yes, thank goodness." "Why did you go alone?" "Didn't want anyone to know." "You're the oldest fellow I ever saw. How many did you have out?" Joe looked at her friend as if she did not understand him, then began to laugh, as if mightily amused at something. "There are 2 which I want to have come out, but I must wait a week." "What are you laughing at? You are up to some mischief, Joe," said Laurie, looking mystified. It was Laurie the whole time? "So are you. What were you doing, sir, up in that billiard saloon?" "Begging your pardon, ma'am, it wasn't a billiard saloon, but a gymnasium, and I was taking a lesson in fencing." "I'm glad of that." "Why?" "You can teach me, and then, when we play Hamlet, you can be Laertes, and we can make a fine thing of the fencing scene." Laurie burst out with a hearty boy's laugh, which made several passers-by smile in spite of themselves. "I'll teach you, whether we play Hamlet or not. It's grand fun, and will strengthen you up capitally. But I don't believe that was your only reason for saying I'm glad. in that decided way, was it now? No, I was glad you were not in the saloon, because I hope you never go to such places. Do you? Not often. I wish you wouldn't. It's no harm, Joe. I have billiards at home, but it's no fun unless you have good players. So as I'm fond of it, I come sometimes and have a game with Ned Moffat, or some of the other fellows. Oh, dear, I'm so sorry, for you'll get to liking it better and better, and it will waste time and money and grow like those dreadful boys. I did hope you'd stay respectable and be a satisfaction to your friends, said Joe, shaking her head. Can't a fellow take a little innocent amusement now and then without losing his respectability? Asked Laurie, looking nettled. That depends on how and where he takes it. I don't like Ned and his set, and wish you'd keep out of it. Mother won't let us have him at our house, though he wants to come, and if you grow like him, she won't be willing to have us frolic together as we do now. Won't she? Asked Laurie anxiously. No, she can't bear fashionable young men. She'd shut us up all in bandboxes rather than have us associate with them. Well, she needn't get out her bandboxes yet. I'm not a fashionable party and don't mean to be, but I do like harmless larks now and then, don't you? Yes, nobody minds them, so lark away. But don't get wild, will you? Or there will be an end to all of our good times. I'll be a double distilled saint. I can't bear saints. Just be a simple, honest, respectable boy, and we'll never desert you. I don't know what I should do if you acted like Mr. King's son. He had plenty of money, but didn't know how to spend it, got tipsy and gambled and ran away, and forged his father's name, I believe. It was altogether horrid. You think I'm likely to do the same? Much obliged. No, I don't. Oh, dear, no. But I hear people talking about money being such a temptation. I sometimes wish you were poor. I shouldn't worry then. Do you worry about me, Joe? A little, when you look moody or discontented, as you sometimes do, for you've got such a strong will. If you once get started wrong, I'm afraid it would be hard to stop you. Laurie walked in silence a few minutes, and Joe watched him, wishing that she had held her tongue, for his eyes looked angry, though his lips still smiled at her, as if... his lips still smiled as if at her warnings. Are you going to deliver lectures all the way home? He asked presently. Of course not. Why? Because if you are, I'll take a bus. If you are not, I'd like to walk with you and tell you something very interesting. I won't preach any more, and I'd like to hear the news immensely. Very well then, come on. It's a secret, and if I tell you, you must tell me yours. I haven't got any, began Joe, but stopped suddenly, remembering that she had. You know you have. You can't hide anything, so fess up, or I won't tell, cried Laurie. Is your secret a nice one? Oh, isn't it? All about people you know, and such fun. You ought to hear it, and I've been aching to tell this long time. Come, you begin. You'll not say anything about it at home, will you? Not a word. And you won't tease me in private? I never tease. Yes, you do. You get everything you want out of people. I don't know how you do it, but you are a born wheedler. Thank you. Fire away. Well, I've left 2 stories with a newspaper man, and he's going to give his answer next week, whispered Joe in her confidante's ear. Hurrah for Miss March, the celebrated American authoress, cried Laurie, throwing up his hat and catching it again, to the great delight of 2 ducks, 4 cats, 5 hens, and half a dozen Irish children, for they were out of the city now. Hush, it won't come to anything, I dare say, but I couldn't rest until I'd tried, and I said nothing about it because I don't want anyone else to be disappointed. It won't fail. Why, Joe, your stories are works of Shakespeare compared to half the rubbish that's published every day. Won't it be fun to see them in print? And shan't we feel proud of our authoress? Joe's eyes sparkled, for it's always pleasant to be believed in, and a friend's praise is always sweeter than a dozen newspaper puffs. Where's your secret? Play fair, Teddy, or I'll never believe you again, she said, trying to extinguish the brilliant hopes that blazed up at the word of encouragement. I may get into a scrape for telling, but I didn't promise not to, so I will. For I never feel easy in my mind until I've told you any plumy bit of news I get. I know where Meg's glove is. Is that all? Said Joe, looking disappointed. as Laurie nodded and twinkled, with a face full of mysterious intelligence. It's quite enough for the present, as you'll agree when I tell you where it is. Tell then. Laurie bent and whispered 3 words in Joe's ear, which produced a comical change. She stood and stared at him for a minute, looking both surprised and displeased, then walked on, saying sharply, How do you know? I saw it. Where? Pocket. All this time? Yes, isn't that romantic? No, it's horrid. Don't you like it? Of course I don't. It's ridiculous. It won't be allowed. My patience, what would Meg say? You are not to tell anyone, mind that. I didn't promise. That was understood, and I trusted you. Well, I won't for the present anyway, but I'm disgusted and wish you hadn't told me. I thought you'd be pleased. At the idea of anybody coming to take Meg away. No, thank you. You'll feel better about it when somebody comes to take you away. I'd like to see anyone try it, cried Joe fiercely. So should I, said Laurie, who chuckled at the idea. I don't think secrets agree with me. I feel rumpled up in my mind since you told me that, said Joe, rather ungratefully. Race down this hill with me and you'll be all right, suggested Laurie. No one was in sight. The smooth road sloped invitingly before her, and finding the temptation irresistible, Joe darted away, soon leaving hat and comb behind her and scattering hairpins as she ran. Laurie reached the goal first and was quite satisfied with the success of his treatment, for his Atlanta came panting up with flying hair, bright eyes, ruddy cheeks, and no signs of dissatisfaction in her face. I wish I was a horse. Then I could run for miles in this splendid air and not lose my breath. It was capital. But see what a guy it's made me. Go pick up my things like a cherub as you are, said Joe, dropping down under a maple tree, which was carpeting the bank with crimson leaves. Laurie leisurely departed to recover the lost property, and Joe bundled up her braids, hoping that no one would pass by until she was tidy again. Well, that's where we're going to end for today, but we'll read the rest of the chapter next time. Hope you join us then. Bye for now.